The snow outside the Ridgefield Animal Shelter shimmered like heaven's breath against the dark night. 10-year-old Lila Blake, blind since the accident that took her mother, held her father's hand. Officer Aaron Blake, a man who'd stopped believing in miracles. Inside, the sound of barking echoed, but one cage remained silent. Number 12. There, a scarred German shepherd lay motionless, a retired canine who'd lost his handler and his purpose. Yet when Lila whispered, "It's okay. You don't have to be afraid," he rose for the first time in months and pressed his nose to her trembling hand. In that still moment, something divine stirred, as if God himself had brought together three broken souls to heal one another. A father drowning in guilt, a child lost in darkness, and a dog who had forgotten how to trust. What happened next will make you believe that miracles are real and that sometimes heaven speaks through the hearts of those who love without fear. But first, where are you watching from? Type your country in the comments. Let's see how far this journey reaches. Snow swept softly across Ridgefield, Colorado, brushing the town's rooftops in white dust as twilight descended. The mountain air carried a crisp chill, scented faintly with pine and smoke from distant chimneys. Inside the Ridgefield Animal Rescue Center, the light was warm and golden, though the echoes of barking made the walls tremble. Officer Aaron Blake, 38 years old, stood beside his daughter as they entered the long corridor lined with kennels. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his dark brown hair streaked faintly with silver. His winter sheriff's jacket was zipped to the throat, his badge dulled by years of service and grief. Since the car accident that had taken his wife, his world had grown quieter, not in sound, but in spirit. Beside him, Lila Blake, a 10-year-old girl with chestnut hair and clouded blue eyes, moved with slow, careful grace. She held a white cane in one hand, the other lightly resting on her father's sleeve. Though she could no longer see, she carried herself with the cautious confidence of someone who had learned to listen to the world instead. The shelter's air was thick with the scent of hay, disinfectant, and fur. Dogs barked and whined as the pair walked past, each one pleading in its own language for a chance at love. A woman approached them, wiping her hands on a green vest embroidered with the words Ridgefield Shelter. She had kind brown eyes, silver hair tied into a ponytail, and a voice soft enough to calm even the noisiest dog. "Officer Blake," she greeted, smiling warmly. "Good to see you. And this must be Lila." Aaron shook her hand. "Thanks for taking the time, Sally." Lila turned toward the voice and smiled. "Hi, Miss Sally." Sally chuckled. "You're as polite as your father said. Come on, I've got a few friends who'd love to meet you both." They began down the hallway together. As Sally pointed out each kennel, she told short stories. A golden retriever who loved belly rubs, a hound rescued from the highway, a timid spaniel slowly learning to trust again. Lila listened closely to every bark and shuffle, smiling faintly as she knelt near one cage. "He sounds like he's wagging his tail," she said. Sally laughed. "You've got good ears, sweetheart. That one's Milo. He loves people. Maybe a little too much." Aaron crouched beside his daughter, watching her face light up as she reached through the bars to touch a warm, wagging nose. For a brief moment, it reminded him of how she used to be before the accident, before darkness stole her sight and laughter from their home. They continued walking. The chorus of barking rose and fell, but near the end of the corridor, the noise began to fade. The air grew still. Lila stopped. Her cane tapped once on the floor. "It's quiet here," she murmured. "Is this one empty?" Sally hesitated. Her smile softened into something sad. "No, honey, it's not empty. That's cage 12. Aaron looked toward the far end of the hall. In the shadow of a flickering light, a large German shepherd lay curled against the concrete wall, silent and motionless. His coat was sable and black, his tail limp. He didn't bark, didn't even raise his head. Only his ears flicked faintly when he heard their footsteps. "What's wrong with him?" Lila asked. Sally stepped closer, lowering her voice as though she were afraid to disturb him. "That's Shadow. He's a retired canine from Nebraska, served with the police force for 5 years. One of the best, they said, but—" She paused, searching for the right words. "He lost his partner in the line of duty. Ever since, he's been quiet, withdrawn. He doesn't trust anyone anymore." Aaron's brows drew together. "You mean he hasn't been rehomed?" Sally shook her head. "No one wanted to try. He's not violent, but he's unpredictable. He won't eat unless it's dark, won't go outside, and he never barks. Some say he's broken." Lila tilted her head, listening carefully. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, softly, she asked, "What was his partner's name?" Sally looked surprised. "Officer Tom Avery. They worked narcotics together. When he was killed during a raid, Shadow wouldn't leave his body. The rescue team had to pull him away." A hush fell over them. Even the distant barking from the other cages seemed to fade into a low hum. Lila stood quietly, her hand still resting on her cane. "So now he just waits," Sally said gently. "Every night he lies there facing the door. It's like he's expecting someone who'll never come back." Aaron exhaled, his heart tightening. "That's rough," he murmured. Lila's voice was barely above a whisper. "Maybe he's waiting for someone different." Sally gave her a small, sad smile. "You've got a big heart, sweetheart, but he's been through more than most people could handle." "I know," Lila said simply, "but maybe that's why he needs someone like me." Aaron looked down at her, frowning slightly. "Lila." She turned her face toward him, her expression calm and certain. "Daddy, all the other dogs barked when I walked by, but he didn't. It's not because he's mean, it's because he's tired, like you used to be." Aaron's throat tightened. He wanted to tell her she was wrong, that healing wasn't that simple, that some wounds never closed, but the words refused to come. Sally cleared her throat softly. "We don't let volunteers approach his cage too closely, but if you'd like, I can tell you more about his history." "Yes, please," Lila said, standing straighter. Sally crouched beside the cage, speaking gently through the bars as if the dog might still understand. "He was trained in Omaha, one of the top of his class. Smart, loyal, fearless. But after the incident, he refused to work with another officer. They tried everything. Retraining, therapy, pairing him with new handlers. Nothing worked, so they retired him early and sent him here." Lila nodded slowly, absorbing every word. The dog remained silent, but his tail gave the faintest twitch, almost imperceptible. "Does he have any visitors?" she asked. "None," Sally admitted. "You're the first to ask about him in months." Lila tilted her face toward the cage. "Shadow," she whispered. "That's a beautiful name." Aaron stood behind her, arms crossed, unsure what to say. But Sally noticed something, the way Shadow's ears perked up at the sound of the girl's voice. It was subtle, but it was there. Lila smiled faintly. "I think he heard me." Sally nodded, her eyes softening. "He hears you, honey. He just doesn't know how to answer yet." Aaron sighed, glancing toward the hallway. "We can take a look at the others if you want, sweetheart. There are plenty of good dogs here." But Lila didn't move. She tilted her head again, listening to the stillness behind the bars, the steady breathing, the quiet shift of paws on the floor. After a long pause, she whispered, "Daddy, I think I want him." Aaron blinked. "What?" "The one in cage 12, she said firmly. "Shadow?" Sally looked at her with a mix of surprise and admiration. "Sweetheart, are you sure? He's not easy." Lila nodded. "Maybe that's the point. He needs someone who won't give up on him." Aaron glanced between the woman and his daughter, torn between fear and wonder. But when he saw the faint smile on Lila's face, small but real, something inside him eased. He looked toward the silent German shepherd and whispered, "Maybe. We all need that." And as the snow kept falling outside, the faint sound of Shadow's tail brushed once against the floor, soft as a heartbeat, almost like an answer. The air inside the shelter had grown quieter, as if even the barking dogs sensed the shift in the room. The long corridor, lit by a row of overhead fluorescent lights, seemed to narrow into stillness around cage 12, where the German shepherd lay with his head resting on his paws. Lila Blake stood a few feet away, clutching her white cane. Her small fingers brushed the air tentatively, tracing the rhythm of her breath. She could feel something different here, not fear, but sadness, the kind that weighed on the air like fog. Her father, Officer Aaron Blake, stood close behind her, his gloved hands deep in his coat pockets. His eyes were fixed on the dog inside the cage. Broad shoulders, sable and black coat, the faint scar near one ear. Everything about him looked strong, yet hollow, like a fortress that had forgotten how to protect. "Sweetheart," Aaron said softly, "you don't have to go closer. He's not like the others." But Lila only tilted her head, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. "I know, Daddy. That's why I want to." Sally Moore, the shelter manager, stood a few steps behind them. Her face, worn by years of caring for abandoned souls, softened with something between worry and hope. She had seen hundreds of dogs come through these cages, but there was something about the little girl's calm confidence that made her pause. Lila took a careful step forward. The tap of her cane echoed once against the tile, then silence again. She reached out her free hand, hovering just an inch from the cold steel bars. Aaron tensed. "Lila, wait." But before he could finish, Shadow lifted his head. The movement was slow, cautious. His amber eyes fixed on her hand, then her face, as if trying to understand what she was. His ears twitched. A faint rumble of breath escaped him. Not a growl, not a whimper, something in between. "It's okay," Lila whispered. Her voice trembled slightly, but it carried warmth. "You don't have to be afraid. I'm not." Her fingers brushed the steel bars. The cold metal met her touch, and for a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, from the shadowed corner of the cage, the dog rose to his feet. Aaron took an instinctive half-step forward, one hand reaching for his daughter's shoulder, but Sally gently touched his arm. "Wait," she murmured. "Let them." Shadow approached the bars with the slow, heavy steps of an old soldier. His breath fogged the air between them. His eyes darted toward Aaron, then back to the girl. He stopped, inches away. Lila lowered her hand slightly, not forcing, just waiting. "You don't have to if you don't want to," she said softly. A moment stretched, silent, fragile. Then Shadow moved. The cold nose of the German Shepherd pressed gently against her fingertips. A low exhale followed, almost like a sigh. Lila froze for a second, startled by the warmth of his breath. Then, unexpectedly, he licked her hand. A single, hesitant touch that spoke louder than words. Aaron blinked, disbelief flickering in his eyes. Sally's hand went to her mouth. "He hasn't done that with anyone since he came here," she whispered. "Not once." Lila smiled, her lips trembling. "See, Daddy, he's not dangerous. He's just been waiting for someone to listen." Shadow stayed near the bars, his body still tense but no longer distant. His tail gave a faint, uncertain wag. The first flicker of life Sally had seen in him for months. Aaron's heart clenched. He knelt beside his daughter, watching her palm rest gently against the bars as the dog leaned closer. In that instant, the silence between them felt sacred, like a prayer answered without words. When Lila finally drew her hand back, Shadow didn't retreat. He remained there, eyes following her every movement. Sally broke the silence softly. "Well," she said, smiling with tears gathering in her eyes. "I think he's just made his choice." Aaron looked at her, still half in disbelief. "You mean?" "I mean," Sally continued, "I can approve a 30-day trial foster. If things go well, we'll finalize the adoption after that." Aaron hesitated. "Are you sure? I don't want to push him too fast." Sally shook her head. "He's ready. He just needed the right person to remind him how to feel again." Lila turned toward Sally's voice. "Then can we take him home today?" Sally chuckled softly. "We'll need to sign some papers first, sweetheart. And he'll need a new tag. Do you want to help me choose his name?" Lila's expression brightened. "He already has one," she said confidently. "Shadow. It fits him." Aaron smiled faintly, the first genuine smile in months. "Shadow it is." Sally led them toward the front desk, her boots squeaking softly on the tile. As she gathered the paperwork, she introduced another volunteer, Eddie Torres, a lean man in his 30s with a scruffy beard and kind, tired eyes. He wore a faded gray hoodie under a work vest and smelled faintly of cedar shavings and coffee. "Eddie's one of our handlers," Sally explained. "He'll help get Shadow ready." Eddie nodded, scratching the back of his neck. "He's a tough one, but he's a good dog underneath it. You can see it in his eyes." Lila tilted her head toward him. "He has the same eyes as Daddy when he's sad." Eddie blinked, then smiled awkwardly. "Well, that's something, isn't it?" Aaron chuckled softly under his breath. For the first time, the sound didn't feel hollow. It took a while to complete the forms. While Aaron signed, Lila sat nearby, listening to the muffled barks echoing down the hall. Every so often, she heard a soft shuffle. Shadow being led out, his nails tapping faintly against the floor. When he appeared, wearing a simple brown collar, Lila's face lifted as though she could see him. Shadow hesitated at first, ears flicking back, eyes scanning the room. Then Lila whispered his name again, and his tail thumped gently against the floor. Aaron watched, his chest tightening with a mix of awe and ache. "Looks like he's already chosen her," he murmured. Sally smiled warmly. "Sometimes it's not us who rescue them, officer. Sometimes it's the other way around." Outside, snow was still falling when they finally stepped into the fading light. Shadow walked beside Lila, his pace matching her cautious steps perfectly, his leash held loosely in Aaron's hand. Each breath came out in clouds of steam, rising like tiny prayers into the winter air. As they reached the car, Lila turned her face toward the sound of the wind. "Daddy," she whispered, "it feels like Mom's smiling right now." Aaron swallowed hard, looking up at the pale sky where the first evening star shimmered faintly through the clouds. "Yeah," he said quietly, "maybe she is." Behind them, the shelter windows glowed in the snow, and Sally Moore stood watching from inside, her hand pressed against the glass, tears slipping down her cheeks. For the first time in years, she believed again that some wounds could truly heal. The first week with Shadow felt like learning to live with a ghost. The Blake home, a small two-story house on a quiet street in Ridgefield, was filled with new sounds now. The soft padding of paws on the wooden floor, the jingle of a collar in the dark, the sudden growl that echoed through the night when the wind rattled the windows. Officer Aaron Blake watched closely, often standing in the hallway with his arms folded, unsure if he had made the right decision. Shadow was calm most of the time, lying near Lila's chair during the day, but the smallest noises, a closing door, a dropped spoon, made him jolt, eyes wild, muscles rigid as if reliving battles long gone. The first night, Aaron woke to the sound of barking. He rushed downstairs, hand on his holster out of habit, and found Shadow pacing the living room, growling at his own reflection in the glass door. Lila appeared moments later in her pajamas, her small hand brushing along the wall as she found her way toward the sound. "It's okay, Shadow," she whispered, her voice steady despite the darkness. "It's just the window. You're safe." The dog froze, his chest heaving, then lowered his head. He whined once, a sound that carried both apology and exhaustion. Aaron wanted to send him back then, but when he saw the way Lila knelt beside Shadow, her hand resting gently on his fur until his breathing calmed, something inside him shifted. The fear in Shadow's eyes looked too familiar, the same haunted look Aaron saw in his own mirror after the accident. By the third day, a fragile rhythm began to form. Lila woke early, feeding Shadow under her father's supervision. She counted out the scoops carefully, laughing when he nudged the bowl impatiently. After breakfast, she'd sit in the living room by the window where pale winter light pooled on the rug and play the piano. A soft, hesitant melody. The piano had once belonged to her mother. It had gathered dust since the crash, but now, beneath Lila's small hands, the music returned like sunlight through storm clouds. Shadow would lie at her feet, his head resting on her shoes, eyes half closed as if the notes soothed something deep within him. Sometimes Aaron would pause at the doorway, arms crossed, pretending to be busy with paperwork just to listen. The sound of his daughter laughing again, really laughing, was something he hadn't realized he'd missed until now. One morning, while Lila practiced, a knock came at the door. Aaron opened it to find Mrs. Nora Green, their elderly neighbor. She was in her late 70s, short and sturdy, with snow-white hair pinned beneath a knitted hat and a bright red scarf wrapped around her neck. Her cheeks were rosy from the cold, and she carried a plate covered in foil. "Morning, Aaron," she said cheerfully. "I heard you brought home a new family member." Aaron smiled politely. "Yes, ma'am, this is Shadow. He's settling in." Nora peeked inside and gasped softly when she saw the German Shepherd. "Oh my, he's beautiful. Looks strong, but those eyes." She shook her head. "They've seen too much, haven't they?" Aaron's smile faltered. "That's one way to put it." Behind him, Lila called out, "Is that Mrs. Green?" Nora's expression brightened. "It is, dear. I brought you some cinnamon rolls. Still warm." Lila's face lit up. "Thank you, Mrs. Green. Shadow and I were just playing music." Aaron stepped aside to let her in. Nora moved with slow, careful steps, wearing her usual floral-patterned sweater and long skirt. She placed the plate on the kitchen counter and glanced at the piano. "Your mama used to play that too, didn't she, sweetheart?" Lila nodded softly. "Yes, ma'am. I'm trying to remember how she made the keys sound happy." Nora's eyes glistened and she sat down beside her. "Well, honey, I think you've already done that." Shadow sniffed the air, curious about the new visitor. Nora reached out a tentative hand, but he didn't growl. He simply watched her with cautious eyes. "Hello, handsome," she murmured. "You look like you've been through a war." Aaron chuckled quietly. "You're not wrong." From that day, Mrs. Green became a regular visitor. She'd drop by with pies or casseroles, always claiming she had too much food for one old lady. But Aaron knew better. She came for the company. She had lost her husband years ago, and her grown children lived out of state. For her, their home was a reminder that family could still exist in different shapes. Lila adored her. On afternoons when Aaron was at work, Nora would come over to keep her company. They'd sit by the fireplace, Lila reading aloud from Braille storybooks while Nora knitted scarves. Shadow usually lay beside them, occasionally lifting his head when the fire crackled too loud. "Do you think Shadow remembers his old home?" Lila asked one evening. Nora set down her knitting needles. "I think dogs remember the love, not the walls. Maybe he's learning that love can change places, just like we do." That night, when Aaron returned home from patrol, he found Lila asleep on the couch, her head resting against Shadow's back. The dog didn't move when he entered, but his eyes opened slightly, calm and alert, as if silently assuring him that she was safe. Aaron stood there a long moment, taking in the sight. The daughter he'd nearly lost, sleeping peacefully beside a creature once deemed too broken to save. It was strange how healing could sneak up like that, quiet, unannounced, wrapped in fur and faith. The days turned into weeks. Shadow began to adjust. He followed Lila from room to room, his movements gentle and protective. Loud noises still startled him, but he no longer barked through the night. Sometimes, when Aaron left for work, Shadow would sit by the door until he returned, tail thumping faintly when he heard the cruiser pull into the driveway. One snowy afternoon, Lila asked if they could take Shadow for a walk. Aaron hesitated, but agreed, bundling her in her thick red coat. They walked along the frosted street, the air crisp and sharp with the scent of pine. Lila held the leash confidently while Aaron stayed close. As they passed Mrs. Green's house, Nora waved from her porch, smiling wide. "He looks like he was born to protect her," she called out. Aaron smiled back. "Feels like it too." When they returned home, Lila sat at the piano again. Shadow lay beside her, and she began to play something new. Not one of her mother's songs this time, but her own melody, bright and gentle, like sunlight spilling through broken clouds. Aaron leaned against the doorway, his heart quiet for the first time in months. The music filled every corner of the house, and through it he felt something he hadn't dared feel since the accident. Peace. Outside, the last light of day stretched across the snow, painting everything gold. Inside, 3 lives, 1 man, 1 child, and 1 broken dog, were learning to live again. 1 small note at a time. The snowstorm had passed, leaving Ridgefield wrapped in a pale morning hush. Frost covered the windows of the Blake house, turning them into mirrors of silver and white. Inside, the scent of coffee lingered, mingling with the faint hum of the old radiator. Officer Aaron Blake sat at the kitchen table, his uniform jacket draped across the back of the chair, untouched beside his half-empty mug. He looked tired, the kind of tired that no sleep could cure. His dark hair was slightly unkempt, his eyes hollow from nights that bled into each other. The image of twisted metal and flashing red lights haunted him still. The wrecked car, the rain pounding on the windshield, the sound of his wife's last breath. Every night, when the house grew silent, those memories returned like ghosts. Claire, his wife, had always told him he worked too much, drove too fast. That night, she had begged him to take another route home. He hadn't listened, and in that single moment, the screech of tires, the shattering glass, everything that defined his world had broken apart. Now, months later, the laughter of his daughter echoed faintly from the living room. It was soft and uneven, followed by a low bark. Shadow was with her. That sound, fragile and pure, should have healed him. Instead, it deepened the ache. He rose from his chair, staring out the frosted window toward the snow-laden street. In the reflection, he caught the faint movement of Lila sitting cross-legged on the rug, her small hands tracing along the shape of Shadow's fur. She was smiling as she whispered to him, telling stories only they understood. Aaron turned away. He wanted to feel grateful, to thank God for the miracle of his daughter's survival, but the guilt was stronger than gratitude. Why her eyes? Why not him? The sharp ring of his phone broke the silence. He reached for it instinctively, pressing it to his ear. Blake. The voice on the other end was rough, familiar. Deputy Carl Dawson, his longtime partner on the force. Carl was 42, with a square jaw, weathered skin, and the kind of humor that came from too many night shifts and bad coffee. He was practical, dependable, always in his brown patrol jacket and worn leather gloves. "Morning, Aaron," Carl said, his tone brisk but laced with concern. "You back on duty today?" "Just about," Aaron muttered, rubbing his eyes. "Good. We could use you. We've got another break-in over on Cedar Grove Lane. That's the third one this month. Same pattern. No forced entry, no prints, nothing missing but cash and small electronics." Aaron frowned. "Any leads?" Carl sighed. "None. Whoever's doing it knows what they're doing. We're running out of ideas. And patience." "I'll stop by the station," Aaron said. Before hanging up, Carl added, "Hey, how's Lila holding up?" Aaron hesitated. "Better than I deserve." Carl was quiet for a moment. "You can't keep blaming yourself forever, man." Aaron didn't answer. He simply ended the call, pocketed the phone, and leaned against the counter. From the living room came another burst of laughter. Lila was playing her new game with Shadow, teaching him words by tone. "Sit," she said softly, and the sound of paws against the wooden floor followed. "Good boy, Shadow." Her joy was pure, unguarded. Aaron walked in quietly, leaning against the doorframe. "You two seem to be getting along." Lila turned her face toward his voice, grinning. "He's the best listener, Daddy. He doesn't mind my stories, even the long ones." Shadow wagged his tail, settling at her side. Aaron crouched down, brushing the dog's thick fur. "He's doing you good, huh?" "He makes the house feel less quiet," Lila said. "When I sleep, I can hear him breathing next to my bed. It's like he's keeping the bad dreams away." Aaron smiled faintly, but the ache in his chest deepened. She didn't know the full truth of that night. He had never told her that he'd been the one driving, that his mistake had cost Claire her life. How could he? To her, he was still the hero father who had saved her from the wreck. "Daddy," Lila said after a pause, "do you think Mommy can see us?" Aaron froze. "What makes you ask that?" "Sometimes, when I play piano," she said softly, "I feel warm, like sunlight on my hands. I think it's her." His throat tightened. "Maybe it is, sweetheart." He wanted to tell her everything, how Claire's last words had been about their daughter, how she'd begged him to promise that he'd take care of her no matter what. But saying it aloud would mean reliving it, and he couldn't, not yet. That afternoon, he left for the station. Richfield's main precinct was small, a brick building surrounded by tall evergreens. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and wet boots. Carl was waiting by the bulletin board, his short, sandy hair flattened under his hat. "Morning, partner," Carl said, handing him a file. "You're just in time. We've got something weird. Footprints in the snow behind the Miller house, but they stop halfway through the yard, like the guy vanished." Aaron frowned. "Any chance it's just weather distortion?" Carl shook his head. "Nope. Prints were fresh when we got there, almost too fresh." Aaron flipped through the photos. Faint impressions in the snow leading to a broken fence. Something about them unsettled him. "You think it's connected to the other burglaries?" "Has to be. Same M.O., Carl replied. "All at night. No alarms tripped. People say they don't hear a thing until morning." As they spoke, Aaron found himself glancing out the window. The snow was falling again, slow and heavy. Somewhere out there, his daughter was probably sitting at the piano, her hands moving across the keys while Shadow watched her. The thought both comforted and terrified him. Carl noticed his distraction. "You okay?" Aaron forced a small smile. "Yeah, just tired." Carl studied him for a moment. "Look, I know you don't talk about it much, but that night, it wasn't your fault." Aaron's jaw tightened. "Wasn't it? I was behind the wheel." Carl sighed. "You were doing your best to get your family home in a storm. It could have been any of us." Aaron said nothing. He simply tucked the file under his arm and changed the subject. "I'll drive by the neighborhood tonight. Maybe I'll spot something." "Good idea," Carl said, clapping his shoulder. "And hey, try to get some rest. You look like hell." That evening, Aaron returned home to find the house quiet except for the soft hum of the heater. Lila was asleep on the couch, a book open beside her. Shadow lay on the rug nearby, his head resting near her feet. The glow from the fireplace danced across both of them, girl and dog, bound by something unseen. Aaron stood in the doorway, exhaustion pressing on his chest. He knew Shadow was helping Lila heal, bringing light back into her world. But for him, the guilt remained, coiled deep like a wound that refused to close. He sat beside the fireplace, watching the flames flicker. For a brief moment, he thought he saw Claire's reflection in the glass, her smile faint and distant, her voice whispering through memory. "Take care of them, Aaron. Take care of her." He lowered his head into his hands. "I'm trying," he whispered into the quiet. "God, I'm trying." Shadow stirred, lifting his head. He walked over and rested his chin on Aaron's knee, eyes deep with understanding. For a long moment, man and dog sat in silence, two broken souls bound by the same unseen weight. Loss, guilt, and a desperate need for redemption. Outside, the snow began to fall again, blanketing Ridgefield in quiet absolution. But inside, Aaron Blake knew that peace, true peace, was still far away. The house was quiet under the pale glow of a winter moon. Outside, snowflakes drifted soundlessly through the still air, catching the silver light from the porch lamp. The world seemed frozen in place, peaceful, but heavy, like a dream half-remembered. Lila Blake sat near the back door, her hands folded around Shadow's collar as she listened to the faint whistle of the wind against the windows. The clock on the wall ticked softly, marking the slow rhythm of a long evening. Her father had gone upstairs to read over case notes from the recent string of break-ins, leaving her to rest. But sleep wouldn't come. "Daddy?" she called softly. Footsteps sounded on the stairs, steady and measured. Officer Aaron Blake appeared in the doorway, wearing a gray flannel shirt and dark jeans, his hair slightly mussed. He looked tired, but alert, the kind of tired that comes from carrying both work and memory too long. "What is it, sweetheart?" Lila tilted her head toward the back window. "Can we go outside for a little while? Just in the yard. It sounds calm tonight." Aaron hesitated, glancing toward the frosted glass where moonlight shimmered over the snow. "It's late and cold. You sure?" She nodded. "Please, I want Shadow to feel the snow again." He sighed, then smiled faintly. "All right, but only a few minutes. Bundle up." Minutes later, they stepped into the yard behind the house. The night air was sharp, carrying the clean scent of pine and mountain frost. Snow lay thick across the ground, untouched except for the faint prints of birds and the tracks of a rabbit weaving through the fence line. Lila stood in her red coat and wool scarf, her white cane tucked beneath one arm. Shadow trotted beside her, tail low but relaxed, his breath forming soft clouds in the cold. He walked so close that his fur brushed her leg with every step. Aaron stayed a few paces behind, his gloved hands in his pockets. The yard lights cast a soft halo across the snow, and he watched them. His daughter and the dog, moving together with quiet rhythm, as though they'd known each other for years. Lila stopped near the old oak tree at the edge of the yard. "It smells different out here," she said, her voice light with wonder, "like cold and wood and something alive." Aaron smiled. "That's the mountain air. You never really get used to it." She crouched slightly, brushing her hand across the snow's surface. "It's so soft," she murmured. Then, turning her face toward the wind, she added, "It's not scary, like in my dreams. Out here, it's quiet, peaceful." Shadow pressed his head gently against her arm, as if to agree. Aaron's heart tightened. For months, her nightmares had woken her. Cries about broken glass, screaming tires, the sound of rain. But tonight, in the silence of the yard, she seemed calm. Shadow kept her steady whenever she slipped, his strong body nudging her balance back, his ears twitching at every faint sound. "You're doing good, buddy," Aaron whispered under his breath. Lila giggled suddenly. "He's like my shadow, Daddy. Always right here." Aaron laughed softly. "Seems like the name fits after all." From the neighbor's yard, a faint creak echoed, the sound of a gate shifting in the wind. Shadow's ears perked, his head snapping toward the noise. A low rumble formed in his chest, deep but controlled. Aaron followed his gaze, scanning the tree line, then relaxed when he saw only the fluttering of a loose tarp. "It's all right, Shadow," he said calmly. "Nothing out there tonight." Still, the dog remained alert, muscles tense, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the fence. Aaron could almost feel the echo of the soldier still inside him, the trained K9 who had once lived by command and instinct. After a moment, Shadow eased, resting his head back against Lila's side. She smiled. "See, Daddy? He's brave, but gentle, just like you." Aaron felt the words strike deeper than she intended. Gentle, he repeated with a quiet laugh. I don't know about that. You are, she insisted. You just don't remember. They stayed outside longer than planned, walking small circles through the snow. Lila sang softly, a tune she'd learned from her mother, and Shadow's ears twitched with every note. His paws left careful imprints beside hers, as though guiding her steps in time with the melody. Aaron leaned against the porch railing, watching in silence. The image before him was something holy. A blind child walking through moonlit snow, guided by a broken dog who had once forgotten how to trust. For the first time, Aaron realized that Shadow had become more than Lila's protector. He was her eyes, her anchor, the bridge between fear and courage. Come on, sweetheart, Aaron called gently. Let's head back in before you freeze. Lila turned her face toward his voice, smiling. Just one more lap around the tree, please. Aaron nodded, watching as she and Shadow circled the old oak once more. Snowflakes clung to her coat, glittering like tiny stars. When she stumbled on an icy patch, Shadow immediately shifted, pressing his shoulder against her leg to steady her. She laughed breathlessly. Thank you, boy. By the time they returned to the porch, Aaron had already prepared a towel for Shadow and hot cocoa for Lila. Inside, the fire crackled softly. Shadow shook the snow from his fur and settled on the rug beside her chair, eyes half closed. Aaron handed his daughter the steaming cup. There, he said, kneeling beside her. You're officially an explorer now. Lila giggled, sipping carefully. Do explorers get bedtime stories? Always, he replied, smiling. She set down the mug, her expression turning thoughtful. Daddy, when I was walking out there, I didn't feel blind. I felt like I could see through him. Aaron's smile faded, replaced by something deeper. Awe mixed with sorrow. Maybe that's what trust looks like, he said quietly. Shadow lifted his head at the sound of his name, tail brushing the floor once before resting again. Aaron reached down to scratch behind the dog's ear. Good boy, he murmured. Later that night, after tucking Lila into bed, Aaron lingered by her doorway. Shadow lay curled on the rug beside her, his breathing steady, his eyes open and watchful. Moonlight filtered through the curtains, painting their faces in soft silver. Aaron leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. The scene filled him with something close to peace. Fragile, but real. Shadow had not just entered their home, he had transformed it. Where there had been silence, there was now music. Where there had been fear, there was laughter. And where there had been darkness, there was light again. Downstairs, as he turned off the last lamp, Aaron looked out at the window toward the yard, blanketed in white. The footprints they had made, small, side by side, wound together in gentle curves before fading into the untouched snow beyond. He smiled faintly and whispered to himself, You're her eyes now, Shadow, and maybe my faith too. Outside, the moon shone over Ridgefield, silent witness to a night of healing that words could never capture. The rain came in thick sheets that night, hammering the rooftops of Ridgefield like an angry drum. The wind whistled through the pine trees behind the Blake house, rattling the shutters and setting the porch light swinging in the storm. The world outside was a blur of gray and motion, but inside everything was quiet. Too quiet. Upstairs, Lila Blake stirred beneath her blanket, half dreaming, half listening. The storm had always frightened her a little. She could hear the rain whispering against the glass and somewhere downstairs the soft thump of Shadow's paws as he moved through the living room. He had taken to sleeping near the stairs, as if standing watch while Aaron worked night shifts. Thunder cracked overhead. Lila sat up, her small hand brushing the air until it found the smooth curve of Shadow's tag hanging on her bedside table. It's okay, she whispered to herself. It's just a storm. Downstairs, Shadow lifted his head. His ears twitched once, twice. Beneath the roar of the rain, another sound threaded its way in, a faint creak, deliberate and slow. The back door. His head turned sharply toward it. The fur along his spine lifted. He stood, moving silently across the floorboards. His nails clicked once against the wood, then stopped. The smell hit him before the sound did. Sweat, metal, and something sharp. A man's scent. Not Aaron's, not anyone he knew. The door opened with a whisper of hinges. A boot stepped onto the floor, leaving a dark print of rainwater. The man who entered was Earl Danner, tall and thin in a black jacket soaked through with rain. His face was drawn tight, his eyes cold and hungry. He carried a flashlight in one hand and a long knife in the other. The light swept across the room, catching on the family photos along the wall, smiling faces, sunlight, a woman who looked like she belonged to another life. Earl's lips twisted. "Home, sweet home," he muttered. "You took 8 years of my life, Blake. Let's see how you like it when I take yours." Then he froze. From the darkness ahead came a low, dangerous growl. Shadow stepped forward from the hallway, his amber eyes glowing in the flashlight's beam. His body was tense but grounded, his head low, tail stiff. He didn't bark. He didn't need to. The sound that came from his throat was primal, something that warned even the bravest to back away. Earl sneered. "So it's true. The famous cop's got a guard dog." He raised the flashlight toward him. "Move, mutt. You don't scare me." Shadow didn't move. His growl deepened. Earl took one cautious step forward, knife gleaming in his hand. "Fine. Let's see what you're made of." He lunged. The world exploded in sound and motion. Shadow leapt, teeth flashing, slamming into the man's arm. The knife clattered to the floor, spinning across the tile. Earl cursed, swinging his elbow hard into the dog's side. Shadow yelped, but held his grip. Teeth sinking deeper. Blood spilled, hot and bright in the flashlight beam. Upstairs, Lila woke with a start. The crash of furniture, the growling, the thud of boots. Each sound painted fear into her mind. "Shadow?" she whispered. There was no answer. She swung her legs out of bed, fumbling for her cane. The floor beneath her feet felt cold, trembling with every impact from below. Downstairs, Earl grabbed a chair and slammed it down on Shadow's back. The dog staggered, growling through the pain. His fur was matted with blood now, but he refused to retreat. He lunged again, driving the intruder back toward the wall. The man stumbled, crashing into a table. The lamp toppled and shattered, glass scattering like ice. "You stupid beast!" Earl snarled, kicking hard. The blow sent Shadow sliding across the slick floor. He hit the base of the stairs and struggled to rise. His chest heaved, every breath a low rumble of fury. Lila appeared at the top of the staircase, her small figure framed in the dim hallway light. "Shadow!" she cried. The sound of her voice snapped something inside the dog. Shadow rose again, limping, blood dripping from his shoulder. Earl turned, his expression twisting when he saw the girl. Well, he hissed. "Didn't know you had company." He grabbed the knife from the floor and started toward the stairs. "Stay away from her!" A low growl rumbled. Shadow moved, faster than the man expected. He barreled into him again, jaws clamping around his arm. The blade sliced across Shadow's shoulder, but he didn't let go. He drove Earl back, his strength drawn not from training, but from something older, deeper, loyalty. Earl screamed, swinging wildly. He slammed his fist into Shadow's muzzle. The dog staggered but lunged again, pinning him down. Teeth sank deep into flesh. Blood smeared across the tile. Lila could hear the chaos but couldn't see it. She gripped the banister tightly, her heart pounding. "Shadow!" she called again. "Come back!" Her voice trembled with fear, but Shadow heard it like a command. He snarled one last time, forcing the intruder's arm to the ground before releasing him. Earl groaned, rolling to his knees, clutching the bleeding wound. He crawled toward the back door, stumbling into the rain outside, vanishing into the darkness he came from. Shadow stood trembling, blood mixing with rainwater from the open door. His breathing came in ragged bursts, his injured leg barely supporting him. He turned his head toward the stairs. Lila was standing there, small and shaking, tears streaking her pale cheeks. "Shadow," she whispered, her voice breaking. He limped toward her, each step slow and painful. When he reached the bottom of the stairs, she knelt, feeling blindly until her hands found his fur. Her fingers came away sticky with blood. "Oh no, you're hurt," she whispered. Shadow lowered his head, pressing his muzzle gently into her hands. His tail gave, one faint wag before he slumped against her legs. Lila began to cry, holding him as tightly as she could. "It's okay, boy. Daddy's coming home soon. You did good, Shadow. You did good." Outside, thunder rolled again, echoing through the valley. The rain poured harder, washing the blood from the doorway and carrying it away into the night. Inside, the only sound left was the shallow breathing of the wounded dog and the soft sobs of a blind girl who refused to let go. In that moment, in that storm, the world had narrowed down to two souls, one broken, one brave. clinging to each other against the dark. The rain had softened into a steady drizzle when Officer Aaron Blake sprinted through the shadows of Ridgefield's quiet streets. The sound of his boots striking the pavement echoed between the trees, blending with the fading rumble of thunder. His breath came in short bursts as he followed the faint trail of movement down the road. A dark figure limping through puddles, one arm cradled against his side. It was Earl Danner, and even through the veil of rain, Aaron could see the blood running from the deep punctures on the man's arm. Shadow's bite marks. The ex-convict stumbled, cursing under his breath, dragging his wounded leg across the slick asphalt. "Stop right there, Danner!" Aaron shouted, his voice hard and commanding. The man spun around, eyes wide and furious. His soaked black jacket clung to his thin frame, the knife still in his hand, trembling under the strain of pain and rage. "You should have stayed away from me, Blake," he spat, his voice hoarse from shouting over the storm. "You took my life once, but I can still take yours." Aaron's gun was already drawn, steady despite the rain dripping from the brim of his hat. "Drop it. You're done." But Danner laughed, the sound brittle and wild. "You think prison broke me? It just taught me how to wait." He lunged forward, but his injured leg gave out beneath him. He crashed into the mud, the knife skidding across the ground. In a swift motion, Aaron moved in, kicking the blade out of reach. He pinned the man's arm behind his back with practiced precision, the cold metal of his cuffs snapping shut. Danner let out a groan, his face pressed into the wet pavement. "You're under arrest for breaking and entering, assault, and attempted murder," Aaron said, his voice low but sharp with restrained fury. "And this time you're not getting out." Danner spat into the mud, glaring up at him. "Your damn dog did this. You think you're some kind of hero, but you're just a coward hiding behind that badge." Aaron tightened his grip on the cuffs. "You hurt my family. That dog did what any good partner would have done, stopped you." For a moment, only the rain spoke between them, dripping from rooftops and running down their faces. Then the distant wail of sirens began to rise, slicing through the night air. Aaron straightened, yanking Danner to his feet. Headlights flared down the street as two patrol cars pulled up, their red and blue lights flashing through the mist. Deputy Carl Dawson emerged first, his brown patrol jacket soaked through, his breath forming white puffs in the cold. "Jesus, Aaron," he muttered, jogging up beside him. "You okay?" Aaron nodded, his expression tight. "Caught him breaking into my house. He's hurt. Shadow got to him before I did." Carl raised a brow. "That dog's worth his weight in gold." He looked at Danner with a mix of disgust and disbelief. "You're lucky to be alive." Danner smirked, blood trickling from his arm. "If that's what you call lucky." Ignoring him, Carl gestured for the second officer to take custody. A younger patrolman named Officer Neil Carter, barely 30, stepped forward. Neil was tall and broad-shouldered, with sandy hair plastered to his forehead and the kind of eager focus that marked new officers who hadn't yet learned how deep danger could run. "We'll take him in, sir," he said firmly, gripping Danner's arm and guiding him toward the cruiser. As they loaded the suspect into the back seat, Carl turned back to Aaron. "You should get home. I'll file the preliminary report and meet you at the station in the morning." Aaron hesitated. The adrenaline that had carried him through the chase began to fade, replaced by dread. "Lila," he whispered. Carl placed a hand on his shoulder. "Go. I'll handle things here." Aaron didn't need to be told twice. He ran. By the time he reached his house, the rain had lightened to a fine mist, but his heartbeat thundered in his ears. The porch light flickered, casting long shadows across the doorway. He pushed through the broken door, flashlight slicing through the dark. "Lila?" His voice trembled despite himself. "Sweetheart, where are you?" A faint sound answered him. A small, broken whimper. He turned the corner into the living room and froze. Lila sat on the floor near the base of the stairs, her small arms wrapped protectively around Shadow, whose body was curled tightly against her. The German shepherd's fur was wet and dark with blood, his head resting in her lap. He looked up weakly when Aaron entered, tail twitching once before settling again. "Daddy," Lila sobbed. "He saved me. The man tried to hurt me, but Shadow wouldn't let him. He fought him off." Aaron dropped to his knees beside them. "It's okay, sweetheart. It's over now." His eyes swept across the room. Shattered glass, overturned furniture, muddy footprints leading to the back door. The chaos of the fight painted a grim picture, but all he could see was his daughter's pale face and the dog bleeding in her arms. He reached out, pressing his hand gently against Shadow's shoulder where the wound was deepest. "He's lost a lot of blood," Aaron murmured. His fingers trembled, but his voice stayed steady for her sake. "You did good, boy. You kept her safe." Shadow's breathing was ragged but calm. Even injured, he hadn't moved from Lila's side. His eyes followed Aaron's every motion, loyal, unyielding, even in pain. Lila wiped at her tears. "He didn't run, Daddy. Even when the man hit him, he stayed with me." Aaron brushed a strand of hair from her face, his own eyes glistening. "That's because he loves you, sweetheart." Outside, the faint hum of police radios echoed through the rain. Aaron knew backup officers were probably checking the perimeter, but none of that mattered now. He looked around at the damage, then back to his daughter and her protector. He exhaled slowly, trying to calm his racing thoughts. "We need to clean his wound and keep pressure on it. I'll call for a medic unit." Lila clutched Shadow tighter. "Don't let them take him away." "I won't," Aaron promised. He moved quickly to the kitchen, grabbing clean towels and his emergency first aid kit. When he returned, he crouched beside the dog, wrapping the towel gently around the gash. Shadow whimpered softly but didn't pull away. "You're all right," Aaron murmured. "You're safe now." The minutes dragged into silence except for the ticking of the clock and the distant murmur of officers outside. Rain dripped softly from the broken window, pooling near the baseboards. Aaron worked with careful precision, his focus absolute. When the wound was finally bandaged, he leaned back on his heels, letting out a shaky breath. "He's strong," he said softly. "He's going to be okay." Lila sniffled, stroking Shadow's head. "You promise?" Aaron placed his hand over hers. "I promise." For the first time since the storm began, the house felt still again. The chaos had faded, replaced by the sound of gentle breathing, one steady, one labored, and the quiet gratitude that filled the space between them. Aaron looked at his daughter, then at the dog who had nearly given his life for her. The guilt that had once haunted him began to shift, replaced by something purer, heavier. Pride. He whispered, almost to himself, "You're her guardian, Shadow. You're the reason she's still here." Outside, the rain finally stopped. The clouds broke apart to reveal a faint, silvery moon. Inside, a wounded dog lay between father and daughter, the living proof that love, loyalty, and courage could exist even in the darkest night. The morning after the storm broke softly over Ridgefield. The clouds had thinned, leaving the sky a pale, washed-out blue. Frost sparkled on the grass, and the first rays of sunlight filtered through the pine trees that bordered the road. Inside the Ridgefield Veterinary Clinic, the world felt suspended between fear and hope. Officer Aaron Blake sat in a hard plastic chair in the waiting area, his uniform still damp from the night before. His face was drawn, eyes hollowed by exhaustion, one hand gripping a paper cup of lukewarm coffee he hadn't touched. Across from him, Lila sat quietly, her red coat wrapped tightly around her small frame, her fingers laced together. The soft hum of machines and the faint whine of dogs from the back filled the silence. Shadow had been taken in for surgery at dawn. His wound, deep but clean, had been treated by Dr. Jenna Mills, the same auburn-haired veterinarian who had greeted them the night before. She'd assured them that Shadow was strong, a fighter, and that he'd make it through. Still, every minute felt like an hour. Aaron leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You okay, sweetheart?" Lila nodded faintly, her voice small. "I'm not scared anymore, Daddy. Just waiting." Her words struck him, the quiet courage in them, the same kind of bravery he had seen last night in the dark when she held on to Shadow as if love alone could stop death. He reached out and gently brushed her hair from her face. "You did good last night. Both of you did." Lila turned her head toward the sound of his voice, a soft smile forming. "Shadow did all the brave things. I just talked to him. He listened." Aaron smiled faintly. "Sometimes that's all anyone needs." The clinic door opened behind them, letting in a gust of cold air and the faint jingle of a bell. Mrs. Nora Green, their elderly neighbor, stepped inside, clutching a small paper bag to her chest. She wore her long brown winter coat buttoned to the neck, a knitted blue scarf wrapped several times around her shoulders. Her gray hair peeked from under a woolen hat, and her rosy cheeks glowed from the cold. "Morning," she greeted softly, walking toward them. "I came as soon as I heard. How's our hero?" Aaron stood to greet her. "He's in surgery. Dr. Mills said it's going well." Nora exhaled, placing a hand over her heart. "Thank the Lord. That dog's got more courage than half the men I know." Then her eyes softened as she looked at Lila. "Sweetheart, I brought something for you." She knelt beside the girl, opening the small bag. Inside was a delicate silver pendant on a thin chain, the words engraved across its smooth surface. "Love sees beyond sight." Lila touched the pendant carefully with her fingertips, tracing the letters. "It's beautiful, Mrs. Green." "It reminded me of you," Nora said gently, "and of Shadow. Both of you see the world differently, with your hearts." Aaron swallowed hard, unable to speak for a moment. "That's very kind of you, Nora." She smiled warmly. "You just make sure that brave boy gets home to her, all right?" Hours later, Dr. Mills emerged from the back room, peeling off her gloves. She looked tired, but smiling. "He's awake. Surgery went perfectly. The cut missed any major arteries. He'll be sore for a while, but he's going to make a full recovery." Lila clasped her hands together, tears of relief spilling down her cheeks. "Can I see him?" "Of course," Dr. Mills said softly. "But keep your voices low. He's still drowsy." They followed her down the hall to a recovery room lined with metal kennels. The scent of antiseptic and wet fur lingered in the air. At the far end, Shadow lay curled inside a clean cage, a blanket beneath him, a bandage wrapped around his shoulder. His chest rose and fell slowly, each breath heavy but steady. Lila approached carefully, guided by her father's hand. "Hey, boy," she whispered. "It's me." Shadow's ears twitched. His head lifted weakly, and when her hand reached through the bars, he pressed his nose into her palm, eyes half open. Aaron stood a few steps behind them, watching silently. The sight of the two together, his daughter's pale hand against the fur of the dog who had nearly died for her, filled him with something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Lila began to talk softly, her voice gentle and rhythmic. "You know, Shadow," she said, "I can't see the way Daddy does. But when I close my eyes, I can see colors in my head, like pictures. Last night, when you were fighting that bad man, I saw red. Bright, angry red. But then I heard your heartbeat when you lay next to me and it turned gold again." She smiled, stroking his head slowly. "That's what you are, Shadow. Gold. Like sunlight I can feel." Aaron turned away slightly, blinking back tears. Dr. Mills, who had stayed quietly by the door, smiled. "He knows your voice, Lila. That bond. It's healing him faster than anything I could give him." Lila continued, whispering as if confiding in a friend. "I see Mommy sometimes too, you know, not with my eyes, but here." She pressed a small hand against her chest. "She's light, warm, and soft. I think she's the one who sent Shadow to us." Aaron froze. His throat tightened, the breath catching in his chest. "You think so?" he asked softly. Lila nodded. "Yes, because when Shadow came, you started to smile again." Her words sank into the quiet room, deep and sure. Aaron couldn't find an answer. Instead, he stepped closer, placing a hand on Shadow's head. "Then maybe she did," he said. Shadow gave a faint wag of his tail, the sound of his breathing calm and even. Hours passed. Aaron filled out paperwork while Lila stayed beside Shadow, her small hand resting through the cage door the entire time. When evening came, the clinic, lights dimmed, casting long shadows across the floor. Nora had gone home, promising to bring soup later, and Dr. Mills had left them alone for a while. Aaron sat beside his daughter, both of them listening to the rhythmic beeping of the monitor. The air smelled faintly of rain and disinfectant. "Daddy," Lila said after a long silence, "I used to think I'd never see anything beautiful again after the accident. But now, I know. You don't have to see to feel light. You just have to believe it's there." Aaron reached for her hand, squeezing gently. "You're right, sweetheart. You're absolutely right." For the first time in years, he felt something shifting inside him. The old guilt that had chained him to that rainy night loosening its hold. Watching Lila and Shadow heal side by side, he realized that maybe God hadn't abandoned them after all. Maybe he had simply given them a different way to see. Through faith, through love, through each other. The room fell into quiet again, broken only by the steady, reassuring rhythm of Shadow's breathing. Outside, the last light of day filtered through the windows, washing the walls in gold. Aaron smiled faintly, whispering to himself, "Love sees beyond sight." And in that moment, he believed it. Spring came late to Ridgefield that year, rolling in gently like a long-awaited apology. The snow had melted from the rooftops, and the streets, once heavy with winter's silence, were alive again with color and sound. Flags fluttered along the lamp-posts, ribbons of red and gold waved from every porch, and the scent of cinnamon and baked bread drifted from the cafe at the corner of Maple and Main. It was the day of the town's annual Parade of Hope, an event born years ago to honor Ridgefield's first responders, those who protected, healed, and carried others through their darkest hours. This year, though, the parade carried a deeper pulse. People weren't there just to see the marching band or wave at the patrol cars. They came for the story that had swept through the town like sunlight breaking through clouds, the story of a blind girl and her dog who had faced the storm and lived. On the sidewalk near the starting line, Officer Aaron Blake stood in full uniform, the crisp navy fabric newly pressed, his gold badge gleaming in the morning light. He looked years younger than he had that winter night, though the tired lines at the corners of his eyes hadn't vanished. They had only softened. His daughter, Lila, stood beside him, wearing a pale blue dress and a small white cardigan. Around her neck hung the silver pendant that Mrs. Nora Green had given her. Love sees beyond sight. She held Shadow's leash loosely in one hand, her posture straight, confident. The German shepherd walked at her side, fully recovered, his coat shining, bandaged no longer. His head was high, his gait proud, the crowd already whispering in awe as they caught sight of him. The mayor of Ridgefield, Mr. Leonard Hayes, a portly man in his early 60s with a neatly trimmed gray beard and a voice that carried like a church bell, stood on the podium at the front of the procession. He wore a dark wool coat and a bright blue tie that gleamed against the spring sun. Raising his microphone, he addressed the gathered crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen of Ridgefield," he began, his voice rich with warmth, "today we honor heroes, not just those who wear badges or uniforms, but those whose courage lives in silence, in loyalty, in love." He turned toward Aaron, Lila, and Shadow. "A few months ago, this little family reminded us all that bravery comes in many forms. A father who fought his fear, a daughter who saw light in the dark, and a dog who proved that faith doesn't need words." Applause swelled through the crowd, echoing down the street like rolling thunder, but this time it was the kind that made hearts rise instead of fear. Lila smiled shyly, holding tighter to Shadow's leash. The dog's ears perked up, tail wagging once as if he knew exactly what was happening. "Today," the mayor continued, "we march not only for service and sacrifice but for second chances. Officer Blake, Lila, and Shadow. Ridgefield, thanks you." The marching band began to play, bright brass notes filling the air, and the parade began its slow, joyful crawl down Main Street. Police cars followed first, their lights flashing gently without sirens, then the fire trucks with children waving from the ladders. Behind them walked Aaron and Lila, side by side. People leaned over barriers to wave and cheer. Someone shouted, "We love you, Shadow!" And the dog barked once, drawing laughter from the crowd. Children reached out to pet him as he passed, and though Aaron had been worried about how he might react to so many people, Shadow moved calmly, his tail sweeping back and forth, his steps sure and steady. Aaron couldn't stop smiling. He hadn't realized how long it had been since he felt this light, since guilt hadn't weighed down every breath. Watching Lila walking confidently through the crowd, guided not by her cane but by the steady pull of Shadow's leash, was enough to quiet every ache that had haunted him. "Daddy," Lila said softly, turning her face toward him, "are they clapping for us?" He chuckled. "I think they're clapping for you and your partner here." She giggled, reaching down to pat Shadow's neck. "Then they're clapping for all of us." The parade moved through the center of town, past the bakery, the post office, and the church, whose bells were ringing in celebration. Mrs. Nora Green stood near the church steps, waving a small American flag. She was wearing her favorite floral dress and a straw hat adorned with ribbons. When she saw Lila, her eyes welled up. "You look like an angel, sweetheart," she called out. Lila grinned. "I'm walking with one too." The crowd around Nora laughed softly, wiping at their eyes as Shadow wagged his tail proudly. As they neared the end of the route, Deputy Carl Dawson jogged up beside Aaron, still in uniform but carrying a clipboard in one hand. He was grinning ear to ear, his short, sandy hair shining under the sun. "Good day for a parade, huh?" he said, slightly out of breath. "You should have seen the turnout. We haven't had this many people since the centennial celebration." Aaron smiled. Seems Ridgefield's got a big heart when it comes to dogs. Carl chuckled. You're not wrong. Oh, and I thought you'd want to know. The case we've been working on, the string of burglaries around the county, it's over. Aaron raised an eyebrow. Over? How? Carl tapped the folder against his hand. Danner's break-in gave us the missing link. The footprints he left outside your house match the ones from all the earlier scenes. Once we checked his car, we found stolen goods from 3 other cases. The whole ring's been taken down. Aaron exhaled, a weight lifting from his shoulders. So, it ends here. Yeah, Carl said with a grin. You and that dog closed the biggest case we've had all winter. Shadow's record keeps growing. Aaron glanced down at the German shepherd walking between them. I'll make sure he gets an extra steak tonight. Carl laughed, patting his shoulder. He's earned it. You both have. As the parade reached its final turn, a gentle breeze carried the sound of music and laughter down the street. Confetti fluttered in the air like tiny blossoms. Aaron paused, letting the moment wash over him. The cheers, the sunlight, the sight of his daughter walking tall and unafraid. For the first time since the night of the accident, he didn't see wreckage when he looked at her. He saw strength. He saw grace. He saw the very thing he thought he'd lost forever. Hope. He knelt briefly beside Lila, his voice tender. You proud of yourself, sweetheart? She smiled up at him. I'm proud of Shadow. Aaron chuckled. Me too, but I'm proud of you more. Lila tilted her head, the sunlight catching the silver pendant at her throat. I think Mommy's proud too. Aaron looked skyward, his throat tightening. Yeah, he said softly. I think she is. Shadow barked once as if agreeing. The crowd cheered louder, and for that brief, shining moment Ridgefield felt like the safest place in the world. As they reached the end of the parade route, the band played one final song, a slow, triumphant march that echoed through the town square. Aaron placed a hand over his badge, feeling it warm beneath his palm. Lila lifted her face toward the sun, smiling wide, and Shadow walked proudly between them, the hero no one would ever forget. And for Aaron Blake, that day marked something greater than honor or duty. It marked forgiveness, the moment he stopped seeing tragedy in the past and started seeing miracles in the present. A year had passed since that night, the storm, the break-in, the blood and chaos that had nearly taken everything from them. Ridgefield had long since returned to its quiet rhythm, the seasons painting and erasing the town's colors like the turning of pages in a book. Now, winter had come again. The snow fell gently, not in fury this time, but in peace, drifting like whispers from the heavens. The Blake home sat at the edge of town, its porch light glowing golden in the early twilight. From that porch came a sound, soft, pure, steady, the sound of Lila Blake humming. She sat wrapped in a thick wool blanket, her legs tucked beneath her face tilted toward the cold air. Her hair, now longer, shimmered beneath the porch light, and around her neck gleamed the silver pendant Mrs. Nora Green had given her months ago. At her side lay Shadow, his massive head resting on her lap. His fur had grown thicker for winter, the faint scar on his shoulder barely visible beneath it. Each breath that left him rose in small white clouds, a rhythm of warmth in the cold evening air. Lila's voice carried softly through the stillness, a tune without words, one her mother used to sing when the world was quiet. Her fingers traced idle circles through Shadow's fur. Do you remember, boy? She whispered. The night we met at the shelter? I was scared, and you were angry, but I think maybe we were both just waiting for each other. Shadow's ears twitched, and he gave a faint huff, his tail brushing lazily against the porch floor. Inside, through the kitchen window, Officer Aaron Blake watched them. His once stoic face had softened with time. The deep lines of guilt that had haunted him for years had faded into something gentler. Wisdom, perhaps, or peace. He stood at the counter with a cup of coffee in hand and an open notebook before him. The handwriting was small and deliberate, the ink slightly smudged from the heat of his hand. It was his journal, something he had started after therapy, encouraged by Carl and Nora, both of whom had become constant presences in their lives. He dipped his pen, paused, and began to write. December 12th. It's been a year since that night. Sometimes I still wake up hearing the rain, but when I do, I hear her voice too. She's not afraid anymore. Neither am I. She can't see the light around her, but somehow she has become the light that guides me. Every laugh, every song, every time she reaches for Shadow's paw. That's grace. That's forgiveness. He set down the pen and looked outside again. Lila was still singing. The sound reached him faintly, carried by the cold. Shadow lifted his head suddenly, nose twitching at the air, then relaxed again when he recognized the footsteps on the porch. Aaron stepped outside, the wooden boards creaking softly beneath his boots. He wore his old patrol jacket, though now it was more habit than duty. A relic of who he used to be. Lila turned her head toward the sound. "Daddy?" "I'm here, sweetheart." He took a seat beside her, the cold biting through his gloves. "You two look pretty cozy out here." "We're fine," she said with a grin. "Shadow likes the snow." Aaron chuckled. "That makes one of us." They sat quietly for a while, watching as the world around them dimmed into dusk. The snowflakes caught in Lila's hair glimmered faintly in the fading light. Shadow shifted closer, pressing against her legs. "Daddy," she said softly, "do you think Mommy can see us now?" Aaron took a deep breath, the cold air stinging his lungs. "I think she never stopped." Lila smiled, turning her face toward the horizon. "Sometimes, when the sun sets and I feel warm inside, I think that's her." Aaron looked toward the western sky. The sunset had painted the clouds in shades of crimson and gold, the light bleeding through the trees like liquid fire. Snowflakes sparkled as they fell through that glow, tiny mirrors catching the last of the day. "You know," he said, his voice low, "when I was younger, I thought light only came from what we could see. The sun, the stars, the things we could touch. But now I think light is something else, something that lives here." He placed a hand gently over his chest. Lila nodded. "Like Mommy." "Like you," he said softly. From down the street came the faint sound of laughter, children playing, sleds scraping against snow, the muffled thud of boots. The town had come alive again after so many months of fear and grief. Even Deputy Carl Dawson had stopped by earlier that week, joking that the Blake house felt too quiet without his usual rounds. "Carl said he's coming by tomorrow," Aaron said. "He wants to bring that big German Shepherd plush he found for you." Lila laughed. "He's funny, but I already have the real thing." She reached down, patting Shadow's head, "and he doesn't squeak when you hug him." Aaron smiled. "No, he just snores." As if on cue, Shadow gave a deep, contented sigh, closing his eyes. The light continued to fade, the world turning soft and blue. Aaron rose to his feet, brushing snow from his jacket. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's get inside before it gets colder." "Just a few more minutes?" she asked. "It's so pretty out here." Aaron hesitated, then nodded. "All right. A few more." He turned toward the horizon again. The sun dipped lower, a single line of gold stretching across the fields. For a moment it looked as though heaven itself had opened, and from that light came a quiet understanding that life had given him a second chance not through miracles of sight, but through the miracle of love. Inside his heart, the old pain that once defined him no longer burned. It simply rested. He sat beside his daughter again, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Lila leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. The pendant around her neck glimmered faintly. "Daddy?" she whispered. "Yeah? I think I can see it." He glanced down at her. "See what?" "The light," she said softly. "Not with my eyes, but it's everywhere." He swallowed hard, looking at her peaceful face, then out toward the falling snow. The golden glow of the sunset spilled across the porch, brushing over them. Father, daughter, and dog. 3 souls stitched together by loss and love. Aaron whispered, almost to himself, "Yeah, sweetheart, it's everywhere." As the final light of day melted into twilight, the snow continued to fall, blanketing Ridgefield in white. From afar, their house looked like something out of a painting. Warm light in the windows, music faintly drifting through the air. And as the world settled into silence, Aaron's last words written in his notebook that morning came true. "She cannot see the light, but she has become the light of my life." The wind carried the sound of Lila's quiet humming as the snow fell thicker, shimmering under the fading glow of the sun. A soft reminder that some things are not meant to be seen, only felt. And above them, as if heaven smiled, the world turned golden one last time before night came. In the end, Shadow was more than a dog. He was a messenger of grace, a reminder that love can heal what even time cannot. Through his loyalty and courage, he became the bridge between darkness and light for a broken family. God sometimes sends his miracles not as thunder from the heavens, but as gentle hearts covered in fur, walking beside us when we feel most alone. This story reminds us that faith isn't about seeing with our eyes, but believing with our hearts. Just like Lila, we may face moments when the world feels dim or unfair. But if we listen, we'll realize that God's light still shines through the kindness, courage, and love that surround us. So, if this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment to tell us what your miracle looks like, and subscribe for more stories that remind us of God's love working quietly in our lives. May the Lord bless everyone watching, protect your families, and fill your homes with light. If you believe in second chances and in love that never gives up, comment Amen below.